Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Elizabeth Bathory, Cinderella. She's a 4-star welfare rider introduced in Halloween Rising, and this year's flavor of eli-chan provides quite a bit of bang for your buck. I have until the stroke of midnight to get this video out, or it'll actually be on the last day, so step into my carriage and let's get a move on. Oh, the B-side of this video has a bit of story time. I know some of you enjoy that, so stick around. Leading off Cinderelly's kit is Snow White Princess, a 3-hit invuln that lingers for 3 turns with NP gain. Also poisons her for a small amount. A lingering 3-hit invuln is a crazy thing to give a welfare servant, and the drawback is negligible. This gives her some additional survivability against big crit bosses since she can screen for an NP and the turn before or after it, depending on RNG. A 5-turn cooldown also means it can have fairly high uptime, especially against slow charge bosses. Next up we have Red Hood Slicer, a 3-turn buster buff. It also grants special damage against wild beast enemies. The downside is that it reduces her defense by a small amount, but its 5-turn cooldown is pretty good. As for the wild beast thing, there are only a small number of servants that fall into this category, with the only slam dunks being Tamamo Cat, Atalanta Altar, and Daikokuten. Unfortunately, there's only one notable Daikokuten fight in the game, and it's one where you're much better off using Taisui instead. Thankfully, there are a fair number of non-servant enemies that fall into this category, including a number of common trash mobs, mid-bosses, and wood woes. And I have to admit I get a good laugh from the mental image of this joke servant slapping around Mr. A-Ray. I'll note that Koyanskaya of Darkness is also a wild beast, and Elizabeth actually has anti-foreigner damage as an append skill, but this is a bit misleading. The really troublesome Koyan Dark fight encourages you to use casters instead, so maybe hold off on running eli-chan for that one. The last of Cinderelly's skills is Glass Cinderella. This is her battery. It caps out at 30%, so level it first. Of note is its 4-turn cooldown, meaning she has the potential to spam it aggressively. On top of this, it shits upwards of 30 stars, meaning if you find some crit buffs to put on her, she can deliver a nasty combo. But like with all of Ellie's skills, there's a catch, and this one has the most severe drawback of the 3. It skill seals her. For this reason, you should use it last in your combo or in combination with the Atlas uniform. It might seem weird that Elizabeth has so many drawbacks in her skill set, but given her powerful effects and short cooldowns, I'd say it's actually a fair trade-off. Also, it doesn't matter anyway, as you're about to see in a second. Cinderelly's noble phantasm is Fairy Tale Erzsébet. It's a single target buster attack that preemptively cleanses debuffs. So yeah, just toss that out and boom, no more skill seal. Its overcharge effect gives a preemptive 3-turn attack buff to all Fairy Tale allies. A lot of these don't have particularly amazing synergy with her, but there are some standouts. Paul Bunyan is a buffer/attacker, Habitrot, Kintoki Rider, Ushiwaka Maru if you're stacking riders, Berserker Kintoki and Super Bunyan. The 2 Melusines count too, though if you have Meliko you can probably think of better team compositions for her. I'd say this benefits early to mid-game hodgepodge builds more than anything else, but maybe we'll see some weird dual-core application one of these days. The preemptive cleanse is really useful, I can't emphasize that enough. Not only does it counteract all of Cinderelly's inherent debuffs, but it also provides a clean slate against boss mechanics as well. Damage over time spammers, attack reducers, and delayed crowd control too. Now normally you'd put Ellie's NP first in a chain, but you have another option exclusive to NP-based cleanses. You can put it last after one of her face cards to enter your opponent's turn with a mostly clean slate. This is relevant against bosses that punish you for hitting them, with maybe a burn on hit or a defense down. You can't get rid of all these effects since the NP itself will proc them, and so will your extra card if you do a Brave Chain, but it's a niche option that may help you out once in a blue moon. Another really cool thing about Ellie is that she hits the ground running. Halloween Rising comes with one of the best craft essences for her, Aerial Drive. So if you haven't finished that event yet, better get moving before the magic expires on your currency. Halloween Rising also grants you Cinderelly coins, and you can use these to unlock her second append. With it maxed out, she'll start each fight with 20% charge. If you have Glass Cinderella maxed on top of that, you'll have an immediate noble phantasm. Throw in a 50% charger and you can go with even more aggressive options like Origin Bullet, Victor for the Moon, and of course Black Grail. By default, you should have access to Waver as your free 5-star. He'll keep you steady in the early game, but over time, you'll want to grab Koyanskaya of Light and Oberon. Koyan in particular lets her abuse her low cooldowns to unload damage on consecutive turns. Now the one thing that Elizabeth really lacks is a good built-in crit buff. This is where command codes come in. Mistress of the Heavens and options like it can help you cash in on all the stars you have access to. So if you're going to run Cinderelly, make sure you code up her buster cards. This will make sure you aren't leaving damage on the table. If you're wondering how Elizabeth compares to the other welfare riders, she has a well-rounded, good kit. By comparison, Ryoma leans mostly on his card type to compensate for an extremely generic skill set. Kintoki is really strong but with a lopsided kit. A 50% battery and a reasonable steroid, and then fucking natural body. So really he has 2 skills and an RNG reset button. Otherwise he's exposed on the field and vulnerable to retaliation. Cinderelly by comparison is a resilient and effective attacker for most situations where you'd want a beatstick rider. and she's well positioned to occupy this role from extremely early on in account building. She can lose steam in longer fights, but long attritional battles are more of an arts thing anyway, so I wouldn't sweat it too much. The point is, you should get Cinderelly while you can. If you didn't, then you'll have to wait for her to get added to the evocation pool down the road. Alright, now for the fun part, the history. Except Cinderella is a fictional character, so how's about we make it just a story then? Once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. Her mother died when she was a child, and her father opted to remarry. His new bride? A refined woman of good breeding who already had 2 daughters of her own. Before he could regret this arrangement, Cinderella's father passed from an illness, leaving her in the care of her new step-family. That went about as well as you'd expect, with Cinderella being forced into the role of a maid, spending every day being pushed around by her arrogant and ungrateful household. But one day, a ball is held in honor of the prince, and every eligible bachelorette is invited to try their hand at wooing him. Cinderella does everything in her power to go, filling every unreasonable request from her stepsisters and stepmother so they wouldn't have an excuse to leave her at home. But Cinderella made a critical miscalculation. They didn't need a reason, and they left her ashy ass at home to cry about it. Lucky for Cinderella, she had a fairy godmother, who transforms a pumpkin into a carriage that would take her to the ball. But not being satisfied with pimping her ride, the fairy godmother decides to pimp her life too. Cinderella's pet mice are turned into horses, and her ratty outfit becomes a marvelous dress, complete with a pair of glass slippers. Her magical entourage whisks her to the ball, but not before the fairy godmother gives Cinderella a warning. This magic would only last until midnight, and if she didn't make it back before then, she'd be stuck with a pumpkin, some mice, and a lot of questions to answer. At the palace, Cinderella and the prince hit it off immediately, even having a dance. When the leather on my shoes is a little too hard, I feel like I'm gonna go insane. I don't know how the hell you dance with your feet encased in literal glass. But regardless, she runs out of time, having to flee before her true form is revealed for all to see. In her haste, she leaves behind one glass slipper, which the prince takes. Definitely to help find her and not for anything untoward. But the good thing about glass is that it cleans quite easily, so no one would know even if he did. The royal family sends one of their agents out with a glass slipper. His mission is to find the woman whose foot fits the slipper perfectly, and he better not come back until he does. Once he reaches Cinderella's home, she manages to catch his attention despite her family's best efforts, and even though the slipper breaks in the fray, she produces the other slipper, thus proving that she's the woman from the ball. Then she and the prince marry and they live happily ever after. Oh wait, hold on. There's more. Okay, so Cinderella then went on to a series of menial adventures with such highlights as overcoming moldy traditions, one of the mice becoming a man, helping her stepsister find love. Dude, this epilogue fucking sucks. Wait, there's even more. Alright. Then the evil stepmother steals the fairy godmother's wand and uses it to go back in time and make the slipper fit one of her daughters. So then they go to the palace to meet the prince and he's like, yo, what the fuck? I don't remember the girl looking like Ariel, but drunken in her 40s. So then the stepmother drops that Simon Jutsu on him to make him forget what Cinderella looked like. Now he's cool with it, and when the real Cinderella finally shows up to talk about the ball, she just seems like some crazy hobo. Dude, Charles Perrault must have been smoking some good shit when he wrote this. Meanwhile, the stepsister tries to dance with the prince, but she constantly steps on his feet, probably because she's wearing that one glass slipper and clobbing around. Reminds me of that awful Tezcat Ascension where one of his legs is a pile of obsidian. The king sees this and calls her in to have a chat. She's like, I'm sorry, I suck at everything, and he goes, nonsense. Gat moe. And it turns out his late wife was like 3 times taller than him? The point is he's cool with this whole thing. You know who's not cool with it? Cinderella. She learns that magic's involved, so she engineers a plan to steal the wand back using her mouse friends in slapstick comedy, but she's caught in the act and now she's gonna get deported. The prince is flagged down by Cinderella's talking mice, and at first he's like, absolutely none of this makes sense. But then they explain it to him in a song and dance, and that's when he gets it. So he goes to get her, and then they try to arrest the stepmother, but she vanishes. It doesn't occur to anyone that she used magic to hide herself, but she also transforms the stepsister into a doppelganger of Cinderella. So she's gonna get married while the real Cinderella is teleported into a runaway pumpkin carriage, but it's actually just a pumpkin with wheels. So while Cinderella sorts that out, the stepsister has a change of heart and turns down the marriage. So the stepmother goes ballistic and starts polymorphing everyone into animals. But then the prince is like, fuck it, and swords the magic back into her face. She turns into a frog, the real Cinderella wishes everyone back to life with the Dragon Balls, and they all live happily ever after. I think. I might have been knocking a few back last night. But the moral of the story is that Disney should just make a 4th one of these instead of doing that live action garbage. That's right, I watched all 3 of these movies just for this video, and that second one was fucking awful. So drop a like to vindicate my suffering, subscribe for more, and come watch me on twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every weekend, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. Till next time.